It feels pretty corny to start this by saying it was a dark and stormy night, so let's just say there was bad weather. I was on my way to a convention in Chicago with two of my good friends. We went every year and this was the fourth time. The Weather Channel called for severe weather, but we refused to miss our annual overnight trip. We all piled in my car for a 6-hour drive. The first few hours was fine, just raining and kind of humid. Then, the typical Midwest severe thunderstorm had started. The kind where you just look down at the lines in the road so you don't end up in the ditch since you can't see anything else. Once when the lightning flashed, my friend swore he saw a tornado in the cornfield in the distance. We finally gave up and pulled under a bridge until the rain let up enough for us to see. We waited a good 45 minutes and we were running hours late from driving so slow through the storm. The rest of the trip was drizzle and that post-thunderstorm fog that has always felt creepy to me. There were hardly any other cars on the interstate since most people were too smart to be out driving, which just added to the creepy feeling. We didn't get to our motel until about 2 a.m. Since we were poor college kids, we never stayed at the convention hotel. Luckily, we found a little motel a 20-minute drive away that was dirt cheap. We stayed at this motel every time we came to the convention. It was 3 stories tall with no interior hallways. All of the rooms were accessed from outside. Unfortunately, the cheapest rooms were on the 3rd floor, and the elevator hadn't worked any of the times we visited. Checking into the motel in the middle of night was interesting. It was still foggy and drizzling out, but also humid and hot. There were only about 2 to 3 other cars in the dark parking lot, and the only lights were from the lobby and street lights. We walked inside and no one was at the desk. After ringing the bell for about 15 minutes with no response, we actually called the motel from my friend's cell phone. An older man answered and soon came out to the desk from a back room. We tried to negotiate a first floor room since obviously they were not busy. He was a jerk though and kept saying, "They're booked." There were only about 2 to 3 other cars there. Certainly some of the first floor rooms had to be available. Being exhausted, we took our 3rd floor room and prepared ourselves to drag our suitcases up 3 flights of outside stairs in the drizzle and heat. As we left the lobby, the old man called out to us,
"You kids be sure to lock your door, and don't ever answer it after dark."
He went back into the back room and then slammed the door. God, that really creeped me out. We unloaded the car in the foggy dark parking lot and dragged our luggage to the stairs. As we came around the back of the building, we all saw the elevator. The out of order sign that was there before was now gone and the doors were open. The light in the elevator was the only light source on the entire back of the building. It seemed like something good finally happened to us on the trip. The elevator was working and we didn't have to lug all of our things up those slippery stairs. I remember thinking it was weird that the doors were open. Didn't elevator doors usually stay closed until you push the button? But whatever, it was better than the stairs. We loaded our luggage and got in. I pushed the button for the 3rd floor and the door started to close. The doors were the typical standard elevator doors, and right before they closed all the way, words appeared. Written in red paint or marker on the far side of the elevator so that it was only visible when the door closed, it said,
"Well, you're all screwed now. Sorry, suckers."
The elevator started moving. We all just stared at the door. My friend Chris from behind said the obvious thing we were all thinking. Guys, I think we're screwed. It took that dang elevator forever to get to the 3rd floor. With a ding, the door slowly opened. None of us moved. I think we were all waiting for something to come out of the fog or one of those sirens from Silent Hill to start. Nothing happened. The door started to close and my friend Amy quickly shoved her suitcase in the way of the door. We all scrambled out. The elevator door closed and we heard it go down to the ground level again, abandoning us to our fate. Slowly, we all 3 came around to the side of the building. Nothing was there but a long walkway open to the elements with doors along the left side. Completely terrified now, we crept towards our room, which was halfway down the hallway. We were almost there when we heard it, loud and clear in the night. It was that dang elevator returning to the 3rd floor. We sprinted to the room. Chris had the key and frantically tried to get our door open, as the other two of us stared towards the back of the building to see who would come around the corner. Click. The door was open and we bolted into the room. We locked every single lock on that door and braced our suitcases up against it for good measure. We stood inside listening for anything else. We heard nothing. Being the only guy in the group, Chris decided to look outside after a few minutes, but he couldn't see anything. I don't think any of us slept well that night, and we never stayed in that motel ever again. This encounter happened 13 years ago, and at the time I was 14 years old. My then best friend lived just down the street from me, and my cousin was dating her older brother, so I basically spent every day at her place. She lived on the 5th floor of a block of flats. It had 18 floors, so more often than not I'd just get on the elevator. On this particular day I was waiting on the elevator, and it was taking a while. Not so unusual. As I said, this building had 18 floors, so sometimes you had to wait a while if other people were using it. While I was waiting, a man entered the building and stood beside me waiting to get on the elevator as well. Not so odd, but something about this guy had me very creeped out. I can't say what about him made me so uneasy looking back, as he seemed like just a normal guy. He looked to be in his late 30s or early 40s with short dark hair, medium height and build, short beard and dressed well enough, but something about him just seemed off. I could feel his eyes on me as I continued to wait for the elevator. I'm a girl and I've always been small and looked younger than I was. Back then I was lucky if I was even 5 feet, and I looked about 11 or 12. I've had stranger danger and how dangerous people can be drilled into my head since I was little, and while it seems silly to be this terrified of a random man just waiting on an elevator same as me, I decided to still listen to my instincts. It was the best decision I have ever made. I casually walked to the stairwell, which is around the corner from the elevator. I walk in, and the second I'm out of sight and the door closed, I begin to run up those stairs as fast as I can. Now, back then I was fairly athletic. I did a lot of sports in my free time, so it didn't win me too bad to run up those stairs. About halfway up, I hear the stairwell door slam open and footsteps running up the stairs. I pause for a second, terrified, and look down the stairwell, seeing the face of the guy staring up at me from the 2 floors below before he begins to run up them. I run as fast as I can up the remaining floors, my legs burning from how fast I was running, barely able to catch a breath. I finally get to my friend's floor and exit the stairwell. I get to her door and begin to pound on her door, crying and begging her to let me in. She opens the door pretty confused, and I run inside, slamming the door behind me. So there I am, crying and shaking as she gets the story out of me. Her older brother, who was a 20-year-old guy and built really big, heard all of this, and he came out of his room to find out what the commotion was. He charged out of the flat and began to hunt the building for the guy, but he couldn't find him anywhere. I never saw that man from the elevator ever again. I don't know what he wanted me for or what he planned to do if he caught me, but I'm really glad I never found out. My first year of college was a real challenge for me. I'm extremely introverted, and while I do have friends that I spend time with, I don't make friends very easily. I'm simply too shy to approach others, and I'm no good at connecting with strangers. It's just who I am, and I'm okay with that. When I started classes that fall, I was the invisible girl. Never called attention to myself if I could help it. You know the type, I'm sure. There's a lot of people who specialize in invisibility. So I didn't really have a lot of friends that semester, just people I would call acquaintances. We got along fine, but couldn't really be called friends. Now, at this time, I was battling my own issues too. When I was 16, I had some really bad stuff happen to me, and by no means was I over it. It was a major factor in my life. I went to therapy regularly and was treated for major depression, extreme anxiety disorder, and PTSD. I was walking a thin line trying to pull myself together and get on with life, while at the same time feeling very isolated around others. I avoided men whenever I could simply because I wasn't ready to let my guard down, and it was exhausting being on constant high alert. I was also rather paranoid. It's impossible to avoid potentially dangerous situations when living on campus and being the loner that I was. There were times when I simply had to walk back to my dorm in the dark or participate in a group project with men. I worked hard on my self-confidence, and while I eventually overcame my fears, at that time I was always on edge. I'm sure you can understand. One day I went to class in the humanities building. Not a big deal, but the classroom was on the top floor of a tall building, and I usually rode the elevator. That elevator was slow as crap, but still better than walking up 12 flights of stairs. I'm sure you guys get it. I get to the building, call the elevator, and then wait. To my surprise, when the doors opened, I was the only one who got in. That was a relief because of my paranoia. Then it happened. The doors were closing when someone stuck a hand in the middle and 4 guys got in. This wasn't good. My anxiety hit the roof and I backed myself in a corner so I felt somewhat safer. I kept telling myself I was safe and that these men weren't going to hurt me and I should just relax. Then one of them turned to me, grinned maliciously, and then said,
"There's only one girl in here. Let's get her."
And all crap broke out. I'm sure now it was a joke, but at the time I didn't take it that way. Not at all. When he made that comment, I panicked. I had my book bag on the ground in front of me. In my terror, I then picked it up and started swinging. When the doors finally opened, there were about 4 very surprised men either on the ground or huddling away from me while I stood in the middle, hyperventilating and still swinging. I have never seen anyone exit an elevator that fast, and I'm not talking about me. Those guys actually stumbled over each other trying to get away from me. It took me a long time to calm down, but in the end, it was a huge step in building my confidence. I'd been in a potentially dangerous position with 4 men, and I defended myself quite effectively. That was the beginning of reclaiming myself. So to those 4 creepy guys, whether you were making a joke or you were serious and you were actually going to do something to me, please stay away from me and don't ever come near me ever again. This takes place a few years back when I was in university, so basically young and dumb. There was a class gathering at a restaurant for a small Christmas party, and my friend Karen and I decided to meet up beforehand. We agreed to take the train and meet up at a certain stop instead of driving to save us the hassle. I stepped into a nearly empty train cart and sat down immediately, pulling out my iPod and turning up the music. It was cold and early in the afternoon, so the only people on there excluding myself was an elderly couple and a bundled up man sitting across from me. I dismissed the man and turned to my music until I felt an uneasy feeling. I looked up and saw him smiling a friendly smile. I nodded at him but ignored him. I held my purse tighter and slowly started to put away my iPod so I could make a break for it when my stop came. As soon as the train stopped, I stepped off and I started to speed walk towards the elevator to go above ground. The guy slipped in as I feared, and he was a big man that looked even bigger all bundled up, and I was a young petite girl, so I was even more terrified now. He smiled down at me and then said,
"You have the most beautiful shoes ever."
I was so shocked I couldn't do anything but stare down, and I noticed I was wearing my favorite black stiletto heels. I muttered a quiet thank you and inched away from him in the confined space. He sighed and said,
"You must have beautiful feet. I would do anything to have them."
I was freaking out on the inside, and I pressed myself up against the wall the best I could. He continued,
"Do you want to come to my place? I'm sure I have more beautiful shoes for your beautiful feet. I promise I'll do anything for you."
At this point, I was so scared I didn't know what to do except stick my hand in my bag and grope around for the mace that my boyfriend bought me, really hoping I wouldn't have to use it. The man began to smile, and then he said,
"I'm pretty sure that I have a pair of red heels that'll make your black hair stand out even more."
I muttered a no thank you, and I was absolutely relieved when the elevator door opened. But in order to get past the door, I had to squeeze past the man who was positioned half in front of the door. He then grinned and leaned in for a hug, which I quickly dodged, fearing for my life. I'll never forget his angry, chilling eyes when I turned back to see if he was following. He remained by the elevator, smiling sinisterly and waving, still muttering about beautiful red shoes. Thankfully for me, my friend showed up, and at the sight of her, he fled down a flight of stairs. It's been a long time since this story happened to me, but still, I think I'm going to avoid elevators for a long time to come. This experience happened to me a long time ago when I was very young, around 7 or 8 years old. So basically my entire family was throwing a reunion/New Year's Eve party at this huge hotel, and all of the adults decided to go down to the bar to drink, thinking all of us kids were asleep. Obviously we weren't, and we decided to go run out in the hallway to play a game of hide and seek. Yeah, real smart idea. Anyway, there were 6 children and we split into 2 groups of 3, each group hiding together so no one would wander off and get us all in trouble. When it was my group's turn to hide, we somehow all managed to get lost at different corners of the hotel, and being the child that I was, the thought of being lost was already frightening enough to me. After circling the floor of our room about 5 times, I decided it would be the logical thing to just go down to the bar where my parents were. Big mistake. I walked to the elevator, and when the doors opened, there was already a man inside. I didn't think much of it as this was a big hotel. It's no surprise that someone else had to take the elevator to the main floor as well. He asked if I needed to go down to the first floor too, and I said yes. The man was very tall and reeked of beer, and he had a dirty trench coat and sunglasses. I tried to maintain as little eye contact with him as possible, until he asked me a rather odd question. He asked,
"You're looking for your friends, right?"
I stood speechless, wondering how he knew what I was doing before. He then stated,
"You're the one who is playing hide and seek, aren't you?"
I then mumbled a scared, yeah, that was me, finding it really weird that he seemed to have been watching us play this game the whole time. We both remained quiet until the doors had opened to the 3rd floor, not the main one. I just thought the man hit the wrong button or something, so I reached to hit the first button when he reached for my arm and tried to drag me out of the elevator. I then froze up as he then said,
"Come on, I know where your friends are,"
gesturing to the dead end of the hallway where all of the vending machines were. He walked closer to me, grabbing my arm and again attempting to drag me to the isolated section of the hall. I managed to twist away and bolted to the stairs, practically screeching the whole time. I managed to reach the main door only to run into my entire family, including the relatives I was playing hide and seek with, whom were looking for me the whole time I was with this man. Needless to say, I still get a little wary when I'm alone with a stranger in an elevator. I was in a junior college at a local university that is located in the city. The campus is about a mile wide, and I lived a little over a mile from it. I lived in an apartment building that was owned by the university, so only students lived there. It was known as the Poor Kids Apartments, and was the farthest from campus, and also in a bad part of town. The apartments had recently had issues with break-ins, so I was extra cautious about who I held the door open for. The door to the elevators was the one that locked when it closed, and only people who lived there had keys. But sometimes people held the door to save you needing to find your key. It was about 6 p.m. one night, and I was just getting back from class. I had planned on just stopping at my apartment and then leaving to drive to my mom's house for the weekend. I worked about 40 minutes away near my mom's house, so I tended to stay there on the weekends. As I was approaching the elevator, I noticed that someone was holding it open for a group of us. As I was walking to the elevator, I noticed that one of the people he held it open for didn't appear to be a college student. Not only was he much older, late 30s to early 40s, but he looked homeless for a lack of better words. He was dirty and was wearing dirty clothes. He obviously stood out to me, but apparently not the other people in the elevator because no one really watched him except for me. I watched to see what floor he pushed when he walked in. Well, he didn't push a floor. Big red flag. I was on the top floor, and I was one of the last people to enter, and noticed I was the only one to push that floor. Crap. If this guy doesn't get out on a lower floor, he might be up to something. As the floors open and people get out, I notice that he's looking at me and not getting off at any of the other floors. Before long, it's just me and him. I have to think fast because the fact that he didn't press my floor but entered before me, and the fact that he appeared out of place were both red flags for me. I decided I would let him get out of the elevator first because he would have the choice of left or right, and if he chose left, I could run right and get to my door. I got my key ready and let him out. He hesitated for a second and I pretended to be looking for something in my purse. He got out, went left. Awesome. I go right and right into my apartment, which was located close to the elevator. I glance left as I'm walking in, and I just see him standing in front of one of the doors and looking at me. I get into my room and lock the door right away. I grab the few things I need and keep thinking about how freaking weird that was. I start to think that maybe he was dating someone in one of the apartments, and I start to try to rationalize his behavior, but I knew it was weird. I grab my things and head back out and make sure to check the hallway before going back to the elevator. It was empty. Phew. I get back in the elevator and take it down to the lobby. I go to get out, and who do I see getting in with a group of new people? Well, you guessed it, the homeless guy. What the crap? Okay, so now I'm sure he's up to something. He sees me and his eyes get big. I go to pull out my phone because I knew I had to do something about this. I'm about to call the cops while walking out of the lobby, and I run into the security guard who watches our building after a certain time. I tell him everything. He decides to contact the police and have them waiting when he gets back down, and he said he would go up and try to find him. He tells me I did the right thing. I felt really bad that someone else could have potentially been in danger. I just hoped that he was only a thief and not something more dangerous. I didn't hear anything else about it, and I never ran into that same security guard ever again, so I can't say for sure of what happened. I luckily caught a good look at him, so hopefully my description helped, but he might have known I was going to do something and aborted his mission before he got caught. Either way, I always tell people to watch for stuff like that. You really never know what someone's real intentions are. This happened last year in October, so pretty much 3 months ago, but technically last year. Anywho, my girlfriend and I decided to make a Walmart run. She was having nuclear-like cramps and demanded that I take her to go get some ibuprofen. Rule number 1, you never say no to a woman that's on her period. It was already late and we got back at around 2 a.m. We live on campus as we're both college sophomores. I park in a parking garage that is about a 5-minute walk away from our dorm. Not very far at all. I parked on the 3rd floor, but the exit was on the 6th floor, so we decided to take the elevator. It was a Thursday morning, so everyone was in bed, so the campus was usually silent. As the elevator doors opened, there was a man standing there. I was taken aback because he was hulking, about 6'5", 280 pounds, muscular, and had that stereotypical look of a tough guy. I didn't move, but again, my girlfriend could have taken down an entire army of troops with the way she was feeling. She got on right beside him, and I followed. We rode up to the 6th floor and the guy began to make small talk. He asked about our majors and where we lived, how we liked school, etc. He was pretty decent. All the while I forgot to press the button of where we were supposed to get off, so instead we just rode the elevator up to the 9th floor, which was in the parking garage office sector. There was really nothing but offices up there. My girlfriend and I awkwardly laughed about it. When we got to the 9th floor, we expected the man to leave, but he just stood there. He was waiting for the doors to close and said he'd follow us down and make sure we got out okay. I suddenly got creeped out, and I could tell my girlfriend was too because she tucked herself behind me. I'm only about 6'1", 170-ish pounds with the arm strength of SpongeBob SquarePants. But instead of hitting the 6 button, he randomly hits the 3, and in my state of shock, I just blankly stare at him. My girlfriend realized what he did and immediately tried to hit the 6, but we had already passed the floor. So she reached out again, but the man grabbed her hand. His face suddenly changed. He no longer smiled pleasantly or grinned courteously. The look of malice on his face will forever haunt me. I intervened and I pulled my girlfriend back. The elevator arrived on floor 3 and we both bolted out of there. Luckily, we were on the same floor as my car. The man from the elevator gave chase for a few feet, but once we were in my car, he went off around a corner. We drove to the campus security station and told them what happened. It wasn't an hour later that they had caught the guy and arrested him. He was out on probation and apparently he was on something and just messed up in general. But that didn't stop my girlfriend and I from making late night trips after that. That really freaked us out for a while and we didn't use the elevator for a really long time. Only the stairs. When I was 17, I was renting a unit in a decent condo building in downtown Toronto while I went to school. Most of the people who lived there were older people who had lived in the building for years. and they all seemed to know each other, so people often chatted in the elevator and lobby. Anyway, one time I'm riding the elevator like normal, and the short bald man about 60 years old gets on. We nod at each other like normal, and I'm pretty much just zoning out. Then all of a sudden this dude jumps up, snaps around to be facing me, and starts screaming the following things at me.
Who the heck are you?
And then he basically starts accusing me of being in some sort of nefarious organization that I've never heard of in my life. Mind you, I'm a 6-foot teenager and he's a tiny old man. I really had no idea what to say to this guy, so I basically told him to screw off and stop yelling. He continues screaming random nonsense. Lovely. We go back to silence. The elevator stops and another old guy gets on. As if this scene couldn't get any more surreal, these two old guys start chit-chatting. They're clearly old friends. This guy was literally screaming random crap in my face seconds before, and was now talking like it was the most normal thing in the world. I'm seriously doubting my own sanity at this point. The next stop, the crazy dude gets off the elevator, so now it's just me and the crazy dude's friend. I turn to him and ask who his friend was because he just screamed abuse in my face for no reason. Well, his response? He laughs and then tells me, yeah, he's like that. What the crap? The very next day, I went to the condo office and tried to report him, but all I really had was a description and a floor. So basically they told me to try to find out his name and maybe they could find out what's going on. I'm pretty sure I never saw him again while I lived there, but it was definitely my craziest moment of living in that city. I was about 13 years old when this incident occurred, so it was around 8 years ago. Me and my family were on vacation in Orlando and we were staying at the Nickelodeon Hotel. Very, very cool place. Nice water parks and nice rooms. I was with my family, my mom, dad, brother, 2 sisters, and me. I'm the oldest. We were at Universal Studios for the day and got back rather late. On the way to our room, my parents were carrying all the merchandise we had bought, so they kinda fell behind and me and my 2 sisters all got ahead of them. My parents and my brother were behind us. The elevator was just around the corner. Me and my sisters got to it first. The elevator opened just as we were walking around the corner. As we were walking around the corner, a man stepped off the elevator. I barely got a look at him because as soon as he saw me and my sisters, he immediately got back on without missing a beat. I should have known that was a bad sign, but unfortunately I was a little slow back then, so it never occurred to me that this guy was trouble. Plus, my parents weren't there to see the man, so they never stopped us from getting onto the elevator. My sisters were rushing to get on the elevator because they were at the I want to press that button age. We all get on to see that the man is standing with his head facing the ground and both hands behind his back in the back of the elevator. He was very creepy looking. He had brown hair that reached the middle of his neck and looked like he hadn't showered in weeks. He looked like he was in his late 40s or early 50s because he had many wrinkles on his face and a creepy grin. He was wearing black jeans, a red, black, and white flannel, and a black turtleneck underneath. Keep in mind, we're in Florida and this was a hot night, so it was weird that he was wearing all these layers. My youngest sister goes to press the 4th floor button, but all of the buttons were lit up already. I wish I could say that's what made me realize we were in trouble, but it didn't click just yet that the guy had pressed all of the buttons. I held the door open for my parents and brother, and my mom looked at the guy. I will never forget the face that she made. She had a huge smile on her face while looking at my brother, but when she looked at the man, that smile instantly dropped. I saw the look of terror in my mom's face. Even my dad gave the guy a strange look, like he knew to watch out for him. That was the moment when I realized this man was up to no good. The elevator doors then closed. My parents stood on each side of the man. Each were staring at him, just waiting to jump into action in case he made a move. My brother asked aloud, "Why did you guys press all the buttons?" And the older one of my 2 sisters, still completely oblivious to what was happening, then blurted out, "That guy did it," and pointed right at the man. My mom then let out a nervous giggle. The elevator was slow but finally got to the 2nd floor. The man quickly got out of the elevator and went down to the hallway. As soon as he left, my mom quickly closed the doors and we continued up. We stopped at the 3rd floor, closed the doors, and then got to our floors on the 4th floor. My parents made sure we stayed with them this time. We got to our room, and that is when my parents started to freak out. My dad called the front desk to warn them about what happened so they could check it out. That was the last we ever saw of that man. We don't even know if the people at the hotel found him. God only knows what he was up to. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's video. And if you have your own personal scary story, be sure to submit that to my subreddit at reddit.com/r/southerncannibal or to my email at southerncannibal@gmail.com. I'm always looking for new stories. And before we bring this video to a close, I just want to shout out all of my $5 or more patrons, as well as my $3 or more patrons featured on screen. Shout out to Babe Lincoln, Beth A, Kate E, Celeste S, Ellie S, Emily W, Heather B, Howard R, Jacqueline W, Jazzy G, Jonathan C, Lori J, Matthew B, Michael G, Random Randy, Steph L, Tammy S, and Terry H. Thank all of you so much for supporting me on Patreon. I really appreciate it more than you know. And if any of you would like to join these awesome people and also become a patron, head over to my Patreon at patreon.com/southerncannibal. Thank you everyone, and have a good one. And remember to always stay